Well, greetings everyone. Hope you're doing well today. It's been a beautiful day here. Just had a big snowfall last 2 days actually. And so things are just beautiful winter wonderland here. At least when you're listening to this. And the sun won't be coming out probably in seriousness until the latter part of this week. So we should have snow remaining for a good long while now. But anyway, back to the lesson. I hope you enjoy this today. It's something that I've been working on for quite a bit. And I've been thinking about the influence that we have individually, much less corporately as a group, but thinking about individually, what some of the things that we can do that has such power and mostly influence in the world that I want us to think about. And the title is The Power of One Making a Difference. And I want you to apply this to your own lives today in the sense that you may think that you have limited power, or you may think that the power you have, you think you know about it, but maybe there's more power behind it of an influence that you have in your life toward the world that I want to bring out and discuss today in this lesson. But first, let's start with a story that I think is just powerful, that I had in my files that I want to share that illustrates this difference that we have in our life. It was a very wet and a very miserable morning in Ohio when a man by the name of Ray Blankenship, I mean, I've heard about him. He was making breakfast, and when he looking out the window into the great storm that was happening, and the storm water was just draining and ran all alongside of his house. It was just coming down in torrents, actually. But what he saw here at that window terrified him. There was a small girl being swept down the drain near his house. He also knew that further downstream, the ditch disappeared with a roar beneath the road. So Ray ran out the door and raced along the ditch, trying to get ahead of the little girl that was swept in the torrent. And then he hurled himself into the deep churning water. His surface was able to grab the child's arm, and they tumbled end over end down this raging path of water. And within about 1 meter of the drain, going under the road, Ray's free hand felt something protruding from one bank. So he grabbed a hold and held on for dear life as his other arm held on to the little girl. If I can just hang on until help comes, he thought. Well, I'm going to leave a cliffhanger there and continue the story a little later. So hope you stay awake long enough to listen to it. You know, I felt that way so many times. And so have you probably. You feel like you're the only one who really cares about your neighborhood or about the job or the place where you live, or maybe even society's problems. Like you have a passion and you have an enduring thought about it, but you think of looking around, think I'm the only one that feels that way. And maybe possibly because the pornography and the moral fiber of our society is showing through, and other issues that come to your mind and heart that you feel so worried about, and you feel so passionate about to want to do something about it, and you feel like you're the lone person feeling that way. So often you look around and ask, doesn't anyone else care? I mean, why is it only me that seems to have this feeling, so strong of a feeling? Well, we'll finish that story, like I said, and hang in there. But I want to discuss today are 2 Bible stories about the power of one. The first story is from the Old Testament of Esther, and the second one from the New Testament about the story of the talents. Did you know that the power of one person can radically change another person's life? I think you think that, but sometimes we can't really believe it sincerely. I'm reminded of a woman who accompanied her husband to the doctor's office one day, and after his checkup, the doctor called his wife into the office alone. He said, "Well, I'm sorry to tell you, but your husband is suffering from a very severe disease combined with a horrible stress. So if you don't do the following that I'm going to tell you, your husband will surely die. So each morning I want you to rise up to tell you that to fix him a very nice breakfast that morning with homemade biscuits and scrambled eggs and freshly squeezed orange juice, or whatever he'd like to have. I want you to fix it for him to start his day off with less stress. And for lunch, possibly, for sure, you have a 3-course meal with fish or cooked vegetables and homemade bread. And for lunch, also, I want you to draw him a bath and give him a 2-hour salt scrub bath on his back and on his feet, really making him relaxed. And for dinner, he said, I want you to prepare a specially nutritious supper with a reduced fat homemade dessert, but don't let him do any chores or any lifting or any cleaning, because this would probably make his stress even worse. And each night before you go to bed, I want you to give your husband a 90-minute massage and rub his feet thoroughly. And most importantly, satisfy his every demand and need and request. If you do this for 10 months to a year, I think your husband will make a full recovery. Well, on the way back home, the husband said to his wife, well, what did the doctor say? Honey, she said, you're going to die. I think it sounded like my wife would say probably as well. You know, history is so full of accounts of single individuals who have made a difference. Now think of the military battles that have turned on the axis of one heroic person doing something unbelievable that changed the tide of war. Now think about the great artists and the contributions of their individual lives, like Michelangelo or Da Vinci or Brahms or Beethoven. Those one lives have changed all of history since their life. Think of the scientists, the inventors, the explorers, and the technological experts who have changed the course of history. Just one individual. And think of the courageous preachers and theologians down through time have stood in the gap and made a difference in the society today. The face of the church was changed by individuals like Augustine and Luther and Wesley and Billy Graham, for example, just to name only a few that stand out in our minds going, wow, the impact they made. Or look at it from another angle. Think of a difference one vote can make. Now, come voting time, many neglected to exercise that one of the greatest privileges of our nation, our democracy. But thinking of that, their vote would make no difference. Well, guess what? In 1776, one vote gave America the English language instead of German. Did you know that? In 1845, one vote brought Texas into the Union. Otherwise, it'd still be a republic in an independent country. In 1868, one vote saved President Andrew Johnson from impeachment. In 1875, one vote changed France from a monarchy to a republic. One vote. In 1923, one vote gave Adolf Hitler control of the Nazi Party. In 1941, one vote saved the Selective Service system just 12 weeks before Pearl Harbor. And there are many more historical one-vote moments in history that I've only named just a few. So when I read God's Word, I find individual men and women who made a difference. From Genesis to Revelations, we see God's hand on the lives of individuals who thought and said and did what was right, regardless of the circumstances. And as a result, history was made. The Bible has understood the power of one. How about a little pop quiz on the Bible? If you feel up to it, if you know the answer, kind of shout it out where you are, or maybe just kind of say it out loud in your head. Number one, how many people were chosen by God to confront Pharaoh and lead the Exodus? One. How many people did it take to knock down the giant called Goliath? One. How many prophets were called to stand before the wicked King Ahab, one. And how many women were called to give birth to the Son of God? One. Too often, many of us believe that there are others far more important and far more capable and far more talented and far more gifted. And so we just sit on the sideline, just kind of rooting them on and admiring them and respecting them and thanking them for what they're done. Our first story is a great example of the power of a woman in a crisis time. She couldn't fathom how she could make a difference, and she certainly didn't think there was anything she could do. It was only a matter of time before all the Jews on the planet would be exterminated. We hear from the book of Esther, the 3rd chapter and the 4th chapter. I'll not read it to you, but let me tell you the story. The woman's name was Esther. Esther was a Jewish wife of a Persian king, King Xerxes. The man was about to be tricked into making an irrevocable, disastrous decision of Hitler proportions during his reign. His goal was to eliminate the entire Jewish population. But believe it or not, one person made the difference. Esther's adopted father, called Mordecai, realized that Esther alone held the key to her husband's heart. And so he appealed to her conscience and listened again to his plea. He said, "If you remain silent at this time, you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have attained royalty for such a time as this?" The Hebrew word for such a time is the word anah, which literally means to speak or to cry out, to testify, because you knew it was the right thing to do. Anah. Now Mordecai was asking Esther to speak her mind and risk her life for the sake of her people. You see, back then no one was allowed to waltz into the inner sanctum of the king. But Esther knew the consequences. So listen to her reply when Mordecai said this to her. She said, "All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that for any man or woman who comes to the king to the inner court who is not summoned, he has but one law, that he be put to death, unless the king holds out to him the golden scepter so that he may live. And I have not been summoned to come to the king for these 30 days. Esther was in a dangerous position, but she was also in the best place to make a difference as she was beloved by the king. So Mordecai reminded her that she was made the queen for such a time as this. The power of one. Have you ever felt that God in a certain place for such a time as this is using you? Who knows why you pass a certain person on a certain day for a certain reason, that God is using you that moment? Who knows why you feel the urge to call a person in time of encouragement because you just feel like it? Maybe God knows, and way back then God knew that the king's choice to choose Esther as his wife was not an accident, but a divine providence. Esther was now in a position to change her world and save her people from destruction, and she did by the power of God and a faith in herself as well. Do you recall when David was asked by his father to lead the sheep and take some food supplies to his brothers who were fighting the Philistines at the valley of Elah? And when he got there, he found the giant Goliath roaming the battlefield, taunting and blaspheming God of Israel. And when he learns what's going on, he says, "Well, let's do something about it." Well, his older brother, Eliab, laughs and says sarcastically stuff like, oh, so you're going to be the big-time hero, huh? How are all these little woolies doing, while you're gone on the battlefield with us? Mocking him. Remember young David's answer? Is there not a cause? And shortly thereafter, he whips his slingshot in the air, around, and down goes Goliath in one smooth stone buried in his head. Of course there was a cause. David implies, if not in words, but in actions, what are you doing just sitting around in your tents with your knees knocking? There's a giant out there who hates the cause of a loving God and a living God. What are you men doing standing here? Our God will fight for you, and if I perish, I perish. Esther realized the same thing. She realized that there was an enemy out there, not only of her people, but more importantly, of a living God. And as soon as that realization seized her awareness, the softness of the palace became very uncomfortable. She broke her long-standing protocol and risked her life and marched straight into the king's throne to speak her mind and rescue her people. One woman, one voice served and saved an entire nation. She said, "If I perish, then I perish." It was an amazing act of courage. Courage is what sets us apart from others. Courage is what sets us apart from others in everything we do. Would you stand knowing you were the only one standing for what is right? In this story, Esther, I find a few practical ways that we can use the power of one to change our world. What did she teach us? Well, first of all, find your calling in a crisis. A couple of years ago, an elderly gentleman stopped by a local playground to watch some kids play baseball. The gentleman just loved watching baseball so much that he would sit for hours watching the game. And from Little League to the pros, it didn't matter. He's just a baseball fan. He loved it. The gentleman was curious about the score and asked one of the young boys in the outfield what was the score. The boy said, "We're behind 17-0. The man said, "Well, I guess you must be discouraged and ready to quit." The young boy said, "Well, why should we be discouraged? We haven't even been up to bat yet." I love that attitude. He found his calling in a crisis. When I get to bat, I'm going to do something about it. Esther feels the circumstances closing in around her and is trying to avoid letting it affect her directly. But she can't. She was called to the crisis. Her temptation was to simply remain silent, to blend in with everyone else around her, to distance herself from her people, from her identity. But don't we sometimes do the same thing? I know I do in my life. Pretend that we're not a Christian when we should speak out. We want to blend in and follow the crowd and conform more than we should to the world. In our silence, we may not laugh at the dirty joke. We may not ridicule the lowly out loud, but our silence is supporting that. But Paul reminds us in Romans to not be conformed to the world, but transformed by the renewing of our minds. We can find courage by discovering our calling in the midst of a crisis. What's a second lesson we can learn from Esther? Use your fear to find your faith. In this story, Esther finally realized her unique calling in life. If she goes to the king, she may die. If she doesn't go to the king, she will most surely die. Her options are very limited. There's nothing like an ultimatum to clear things up. But Esther took the time to pray and fast and ask God to help her, one person, to become a majority. Her legitimate fear caused her to put on the brakes and approach with caution, and then after praying to God, she approached her husband with courage. Did you get that? Her fear caused her to put on caution. But when she was praying to God and God gave her that infused calling, she approached her husband with courage. And he listened and stopped the execution of thousands of Jews. One person, one place, one chance. So the lesson of Esther is that each of us in a particular place for a particular reason, think this week what you can do to change someone forever that you come in contact with. Or even maybe not physically in contact, but through a written word, an email, and just through prayer. That someone just may change the lives of hundreds more, who may change the lives of thousands more and even to millions, all because of the one that you changed. It starts with a calling, one person, one time, one God. Let's go to our second lesson, the New Testament lesson we talked about. God has placed us where we are for a purpose. I don't care where you are right now. I don't care if you're just by yourself in an apartment or with your husband or wife somewhere or whatever it may be with your families, whatever it may be. God has put you there, allowed you to be there, and will let you blossom wherever you are and use you as that one miracle maker. God has his glory in mind for our good. This means that the place that God puts us is not really about us. It's about him and his kingdom. We only look for what we desire. We will always exist in a waiting period, waiting for God to take us somewhere or give us something we want that we deserve, we think, possibly. But if we see the place God has put us as somewhere we can act for his glory, then we will grow where we are and we will cherish the place we are in because it becomes fruitful in ways that we never imagined. It is the place that we belong. So the parable of the talents in Matthew 25 is a great example of this. To summarize the parable, a master is going on a journey. He entrusted his servants with some of the talents, and each according to their ability. The master did not give the servants an equal share. He gave them what they could handle and expected them to do great things regardless of how much they were given. The servant who received 5 talents doubled what he had given, and was able to give the master 10 talents when he returned. The servant who received 2 talents also doubled what he was given and gave the master 4 talents when he returned. The master gave the same response to both these men. Quote, his master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. It didn't matter that they were given different amounts in the beginning. They both used what the master gave them and expanded it for the glory. Now there was a third servant, wasn't there? He received 1 talent. Instead of investing it, he buried it. And when the master returned, this servant gave the talent unused back to the master because he was afraid he might lose it. The servant missed the bigger picture, did he not? He missed the vast grace of the master because he had been too caught up in himself and what he was given, and that it was something that was his to cherish and to take care of for the master and not for what it could do. Because the servant did not use even a little he was given, he was not counted as a faithful servant. Now that parable gives us lessons also. And it urges us 3 things I want to go over very quickly before we close here that makes a difference. Number 1, recognize that God has given you exactly what you can handle for his glory in the place he has put you. So what does that mean? It means that instead of focusing on what you don't have, see the place you are as a gift to be used for God's glory. There's so much we can learn from God when we embrace the place that he has put us in. And this is a struggle. I know I struggle with it in my life because I get discouraged about where I am. I think what else I could be doing elsewhere else. I have all this thinking, and I think that God's not using me. And blindly right in front of me, I am making a difference if I just put myself in God's hands and let him use me. And the same will happen to you wherever you are in your life. That remember, wherever you are in God's purpose for this place, he's equipped you to bring him glory there. So do not deny him that, for he is his will. Number 2, we learn from this. Use what God has given you to the best of your ability for his glory. He gave you strength. You need to accomplish the task that he's placed before you. In Matthew 5, it says, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. The gospel is to be shared with all people, in all places, at all times, not when we think so. It's a time when God leads us to voice it. When God uses our life and our values and how we treat other people, how we love, without even being conscious about it, and it's changing people's lives. Wherever you are a steward of God's gospel in your community. So don't waste the place you're in because it doesn't fit your ideal description of where you want to be. And that's a hard lesson for me as well, like I've talked about. No matter what, continue to use what you have been given for the glory of the great giver. The third lesson and last I learned from this: do not compare what God has given you with what he has given someone else. If you've been given what seemed like a little, do great things with that little if it's one talent. It's not how much you have, but rather what you do with it, and great things for God in order to glorify him. Everything we have has been given to God first. And in a little bit, he gives us a gift to be used and shared in humility and joy. When we do not use it, what God's given us, we're surely coveting something else or something someplace else. We're taking things away from God. We often focus on maybe earthly blessings we desire and have yet to receive, rather than the eternal blessings that we've been promised by God if we just do it for his glory, which are infinitely better than anything we could ever get on this earth, that's for sure. So, question is, are we producing where God has placed us? If not, ask yourself why you are not using the gifts God has given you. For when the Master returns someday, he will look not at how much you did, but your faithfulness with what you have been given. That's the message. The third servant received 1 talent, and instead of investing it, he buried it. When the master returned, the servant gave the talent unused back to the master. The servant missed a bigger picture, and we already know the story how that goes. So let's now finish our cliffhanger story. I hope you see, Ray Blankenship is the guy's name. And we already know that he is in this torrent of water of this huge storm and holding on to a little girl's arm with one hand and holding on to some protrusion from the side of the ditch before it swept under inside this culvert that would kill them both. So he held on with one hand to the little girl in a churning deep water in a draining ditch, and the other for dear life on the side. All he had to do is to hold on for help to come. But he did better than that. By the time the fire department rescuers arrived, Ray had pulled the girl to safety. Both were treated for shock, and on April 12th, in 1989, Ray Blankenship was awarded the U.S. Coast Guard's Silver Life-Saving Medal. The award is fitting. Ray Blankenship was at even greater risk to himself than most people knew. You see, Ray couldn't swim. How you like that? We surprise ourselves often. We worry about things in life till the task is larger than any strength or talent we possess. The problem we face becomes larger than life. We look around, searching for a quick way out. A miracle will give us the answer, but to no avail. So we reach deep down inside of us to not sure which way to go, but knowing to do nothing is destruction and severe loss. And on top of that, something we'd be ashamed if we didn't try to do something. So we reach into the resources hidden deep within us, and we struggle forward to make life work and to keep the spiritual beliefs from fading away. We try to reach our hand out for another, to make a difference with that one. Whatever it may be, we hold on for a little longer and use the miracles we already possess within us to make the difference. It takes trial and testing to see that we are a miracle of unlimited potential, even if we can't swim. Well, here's closing. What can I, as one individual, contribute to the overwhelming needs of our world, our church, our community, our family? The truth is, you are you. The only one, you in all the world, made by God with your unique capabilities and potential. Nobody can do the things that God has called and gifted you to do. Edward Everett Hale puts it this way: I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something that I can do. Like Ray Blankenship, don't let go. Make a difference to the one person God has enabled. You are not alone. God is by your side. May the Lord bless you this day. Amen.